Hello friends, in this video we are going to look at the usage of java.awt.panels, and we will also learn how we can use this AWT panel to nest the containers. So here this video example creates a two panel with its own components. Then it adds these two panel to the AWT frame window. Since AWT Frame Window itself is a container, these two panels added inside this panel is called nesting the container. So that's the prerequisite. So first we have to create a frame window that's explained here in this video. So playlist is 04 Java AWT, video is first one. AWT panel is a simple container which does not have any border. So frame is also a container, but it has a border. Also, frame is a top level container. All containers in Java is also a component. The frame is a top level container. So we used frame for a quite long time, and that frame is a top level container. Since it's a container, it can hold other components. In the previous videos, we saw how to add label, text fields, checkboxes inside this frame window. Since it's a container, it accommodates these components. So frame window is a top level container, but panel is not a top level container or a top level window. So we can treat AWT panel as container as well as component, that means control. When we treat the container, that means the panel, as a container, it houses other components like text field, checkbox, and label. There are other components also. In this video series, so far we have looked at text field, checkbox, and label. So I have taken those as an example. So in the frame window, we added these components or controls. The same way, we can add these text field, checkbox, and label to a panel when it is acting as a container. Since it is a container, it can also employ an layout manager. So that layout manager manages how to arrange these components. Alright, so that's the role of a panel acting as a container. But the panel can act as a component also. So when it is acting as a component, we can add this panel to other container. So frame is a container. So once you add components to this panel, we can add this panel to a frame window. So when we are adding this panel to a frame window, the panel here is acting as a component. So the frame plays the role of container and the panel plays the role of a component. But when we talk about panel and controls added to this panel, the panel plays the role of a container because it is accommodating other controls. For example, we can add a panel control to an AWT frame or even other AWT panels. So you can create a panel, then you can nest other panel inside this first panel. So here in this example, we are going to create a two panel and we will add those two panel to frame window. So this is what called nesting the containers. And instead of adding the frame window, you can add it to another panel also. But since panel is not a top level window, finally that panel should be placed in any of the top level window like frame or dialog or even applet. Applet is the old technology. Alright. So the note here is flow layout is the default layout manager for AWT panel, and border layout is the default for frame window. Okay, here is the example we are going to create here in this video. If you look at here, border layout demo, that's the name given for the previous example. I haven't changed it. Alright, so let's forget that that's the frame window. And in the top, if you see, there is a text box which occupies the entire width of our frame window. So that is marked with a red arrow. So that text box we are going to use to show some text output. And the point that you have to note here is that the text box is occupying the full width. Next, we have 3 text boxes. So those text boxes are used to collect input from the user. And in the left side, if you see, there is a 3 accompanying label that tells what kind of input we need from the user. So for example, the first label states a student register number. So the user will enter the registration number of the student. The next label states the student name. So in that second text box, user will enter the student name. Also, there is a fourth control towards the bottom right of the frame window. So that is a save info button, and towards the left of the save info, we have a label that tells click here to record. So once user clicks the save info button, all the data entered in the 3 text boxes, which is pointed with a blue arrow here. So those infos are read, then a string is formed, then that string is shown in the output text box, which is staying in the top. So here what we are going to do, the first control is actually a panel, one panel, then all the remaining controls stays in a next panel. So here we are just exploring how to add a panel to the frame window so that you can achieve different kind of control layout. So here is our first step. In code snippet 1, we declared a text field, text output. So in the previous screen, we saw that text box is staying in the top of the frame window. Next, we declare 3 more text boxes. So this is where the user will provide their input. Next, we are starting our constructor. If you see here, code snippet 1 and 2 declares 4 text field at the class level. Why? Because when user clicks the button, we need reference to these controls. Why? Because during the action of the click, we want to read the information from the user. So user will enter their information in these 3 text field at code snippet 2. So in the click event, we will collect this, we form a output string, then we will place that in a text box which is declared in code snippet 1. So in the frame window constructor, if you see at code snippet 3, we create 2 panel. So this panel is coming from java.awt package, and this panel is a container as well as a component. So here we create top panel. In this top panel we will add the output text box. The text box is created in code snippet 1. I mean, not created, declared. So we will create it in the next step. Next, in the bottom panel we will create the remaining control and we will add it. Alright, so this is our first step. Next, we will prepare the top panel and nest it to our frame window. Then we will go to Eclipse and see how it looks before proceeding with the next step. So in the previous step we created a two panel, right? So first here we are picking the first panel, which is a top panel, and we are setting the layout as a grid layout. Here we are specifying grid layout of 1, 1. That means one row, one column. So the panel, since it is set with a grid layout of 1, 1, it can hold only one component. Alright, in the next line we are creating a text field. Then we are setting the foreground color as red. So whatever you type or the code places a text in that text box, that will appear in a red color. Next, if you look at here, we are adding this text box to top panel. Note down here we are not adding this text box to our frame window. Here we are adding this text box to the top panel. So top panel is a reference and we know the type is a panel. So here at this step, top panel dot add txt output, which is a text field. At this line of statement, the tab panel is acting as a container. Why? Because it is accommodating a control, that means a component. The component here is txt output and txt output is a text field. Text field is from java.awt and it's a component. Alright, so in the very next step, if you see, we are making call to add again. So there are two add method you are seeing. First we are making a call to add method from top panel. Top panel is a panel. The panel is adding the control. Next, here we are making call to add method. So this code snippet 4 we are going to place inside the constructor of the frame. So here add method is a frames method. Frame is a top level container and here we are adding. So the default layout of border layout, that's what we are using, border layout.north. So we are adding something to the frame window at the north location. So the default layout we are using, default layout for frame window is border layout. That's why we are making call to border layout.north. And previously I told we are adding something, right? That something is nothing but this panel. So here we are adding this panel to our frame window. At this stage, the panel is acting as a component. In the previous statement, the panel is acting as a container because it is adding a text box to it. And it employed its own layout manager, which is a grid layout. Next, the panel is added to the frame window. And this time the panel is acting as a component. And the panel will get added to the frame window along with its control, which is a text field. And when the panel is added, it is added to the frame window, and frame window's border layout manager manages this panel. Since we specified north, the panel is added towards the north of the frame window. Alright, here we see the dual role for the panel, right? So at the very last line in the snippet left side, the panel is acting as a component. So that is playing the role of component at the last statement. And last but one statement, that means top panel dot add, there it is acting as a container. So our panel is acting a dual role here. It is acting as a container as well as a component. And if you look at here at this stage, if we execute, you can see the panel is added towards the north of the frame window. All right, now let us go to Eclipse and see how it works. Here is our frame window, right? First, we need to action listener we will implement later. So first we need to declare some members towards the class. So here is where we are starting our constructor. So just before this line, we declared 4 text fields. So let's import the all right. So the text fields are declared. So in the third code snippet, we create a 2 panel. So the top panel and bottom panel. That's all. Next, we prepare our top panel. So here we created a top panel, right? Next, what we are doing, we are just employing grid layout manager for this top panel. So whatever control you add, that is managed by the grid layout manager. And grid layout is defined with 1x1. That means it can hold only one component. So we create our text box here, text output. Then we are setting the color and importing the java.awt. Color is a constant. Color.ret we defined. After that, we are adding this text box to our panel, top panel. That's the panel control here. We are adding our text box. Next, we add this panel. This is the top panel, right? Here we declare, then we set layout as grid layout. After that, we created our text field and we added that to our panel. Then we are adding this panel to the add method of our frame window. So this is the frame, and if you see, there is no dot notation. We are just directly making call to add because we are inside the frame window. Frame window is the class we created and which extends from frame. So the add method is the method of the component. Actually, it's a containers method. Java AWT container add. All right. So top panel is added towards the north. Now let us execute it. And if you see, the text box is towards the top, and this portion is unoccupied. And frame window manages the components using the border layout. That means it can accommodate 5 components, one in the north, one in the south, east and west, then central portion. But when we are adding the panel, we are adding it towards the north. All right. So the panel is added here. How we are seeing the text box? Well, because the panel contains one control, and that control is text box, which is managed by the layout manager, which is grid layout manager. And grid layout manager can hold only one component because of one row and one column. Now let's experiment something here. Instead of north, I'm going to specify it as south here. Now if I execute it, you can see that the panel is added towards the bottom. So that's how you can add wherever you want. Alright, now our frame window is ready with one panel. Now we will add our second panel. So the bottom panel also we are setting the grid layout, but this time the grid layout is for class 2. That means there are 4 rows and 2 columns. And if you remember the very first screenshot, the left side column is having all the labels. That means the registration number, name, nationality. Click here to record, and you can see that here those 4 labels we are creating. So the next column, the right side column, there are only 2 columns here, right? 4 rows, 2 columns. That's how we create the grid layout, new grid layout of 4,2. The left column is for label, the right column is for the controls or user navigable control. So first we create 4 labels here. Next we create the user navigable items. We create a text field and we are storing that to txt region, txt name, txt nationality. And if you remember, these text fields are declared at class level because we need these text field in the action listener of the button. So we declared at a class level. In the constructor, we are creating the text field and storing that in the reference. Then we are creating a button save info. And so all 8 controls are ready here. So there are 4 labels and then there are 4 user navigable control. So the controls are created here. Next we have to add it in a specific order so that all the label stays towards left and the control stays towards the right. I mean the first column stores all the labels and second column stores all this text box and button. So if you see how we are calling the add method, first we add the LBL register number, then we add the text, then label, text, label, text. So finally we add LBL save, then button save. So we know that the grid layout fills the control from left to right, and when the row is filled, it moves to the next row. So this is the order we are adding the control so that we achieve what we want. So if we see here, first we added a student register number. Think of that as a grid. 4 class 2 grid. That means 4 row 2 grid. So just imagine like that. The student registration number is towards the first row, first cell. Then there is a text box, txt reg num. First row, second column. Then we are adding label name. That will be second row, first column. Then txt name, second row, second column. So likewise, we are adding all other controls. Finally, we are adding this to the border layout dot center because we want to occupy all the remaining area. So we already know that, right? Frame Window's default layout is a border layout, and border layout will have a fixed size towards the edges. That means border layout dot left, I mean the east, west, north and south, those will have a fixed size. So whenever you resize, it maintains the same size. But here we want to add this 4x2 grid towards the center of this border layout. So when you resize the form, the control will get resized, but the label in the text box in the top, that means the output text box, or we can say the text box which is in the top panel, since it is added in the north, it will stick to that size. And all these control, the three text box and the button will resize. Label also will resize, but text will remain same. Alright, now we will go to Eclipse for this demo. Alright, now here if you see, we are preparing our second panel. Let me fix this label. Alright, so previously we created first panel, that means the top panel, and we added it to the frame window. Now we already created bottom panel. Now we are setting the grid layout to it. Then we are creating a 4 label. So these 4 labels will occupy the left column of the grid, and then here we are creating the couple of text field, the 3 text field. Then we need one button also. So we will use the set of controls to fill the second column of the grid. Remember, all this stuff we are doing this in the constructor of our frame window class, which is extending from the frame. Next, if you see, we are adding all our control, and if you see, first we are adding the label, so it highlights here, you can see. Next, if you see the next label, we are alternating. We are adding the text box, after that we are adding the label. The third one we are adding after adding the text name. So this is how the rows get filled. So it's already explained in the slide. Alright, now our panel is ready with the controls. Next we need to add our bottom panel to the frame window. So now our frame window is ready. Now let us execute. And if you see, we have all the controls. Now let me resize this form. As already told, if you see, the height of this first panel remains unaltered, but other controls will get resized. And if you see here, this is resized. Alright. So if you see here, the second panel automatically resizes because we added it to the border layout dot center. We know that border layout dot center spans when we expand the window, because it is not sticked to any edge. But if you look at here, the north, the panel is sticked to the edge. That's why if I increase the height, since it is sticked to the top edge, it maintains the height. But if I increase it the width wise, the top panel increases, right? So if we added that towards the left, then it will stick to the width, but height will change. If I expand it like this, then it will change. If you want to see a quick demo, not this one, the first panel. So this is the east. So if I expand this now, the size won't change, but if I expand height twice, you can see that the panel is expanding, right? This is panel, right? Let me keep that to the original position, and we will go to our final part of the final step. So the frame window is ready. Now what we have to do, when user clicks the save info button, we want to display the content entered inside the 3 text boxes in the top output text box. So for that we need to implement action listener. We already saw how to implement action listener. This action listener is for the button click event. So after implementing the we need to change our frame window class, which already extends from frame. We will put implements a listener, then we will the action listener, implement action listener, then we will override the class to implement action performed. Here in this code snippet 7.1, if you see, we are taking the user entered value using the getText method of our AWT text box. Then we are forming a string output. After that, we are using our txt output, which is coming from the top panel, and we are setting a text to it. So we are forming the output text from the 3 text boxes seated in the bottom panel. Then we form a string, and we will set the text field which is housed inside the top panel, and top panel is in the frame window. All right, now we will do this in Eclipse, and this will be our final step. So if we see here, this is our frame window class, which extends a frame. It already implements window listener. Now we will implement action listener also. Action, here I am hitting the control space bar so that Eclipse will suggest. So this is the action listener we need, and you can see this is from java.awt.event. So I'm double clicking it. Now I'm clicking here, and I'm choosing add unimplemented methods. So this will place a function towards the end, and I don't want this comment. That's all. Here, let me just highlight one thing: txt reg number. And if you scroll up, you can see the txt reg number is added to the bottom panel. Previously, it was created, and at the top we declare. So that's the flow, right? So first we declared a class member variable, then inside the constructor we created the text field, then we added it to the bottom panel, and now here in the action performed we are referring the text. So this way we refer all 3 text fields from our bottom panel and forming an output. Then we are setting that output to our txt output, which is part of the top panel here we are creating, right? All right, now let's execute this. So forget about the alignment, all those stuff. So just now we reached the panel in the 10 video series so far. So in the further coming videos, you will know how to beautify further. You can assign a different font, alignment, all those stuff. All right. So in just giving a student registration number, AC101, then student name, giving it as a Magi Gali. Then nationality, I'm giving it as a French person. That's all. Now I am clicking save info, and so once I click save info, nothing happens. Guess why? Let me click, nothing happens. So we missed one step. That's nothing but we have to register our button with this action listener. The button is, this is label, here it is, button save, which is part of our bottom panel. This is our 5.5. So this we implemented multiple times how to handle the button event. That's what I'm doing here. Now if I run and I can put HA101 Nagikali. He's one of the mate worked with me when I was in offshore. He's a nice person. And save info, and you can see the event is handled, and we already set this text as red, and it is showing the text in the required color. All right, so this is a demo for panel and how to nest the panel inside a container. Our frame window is a container, so inside the container we added two panel. This is the top panel and this is the bottom panel. So the frame window treats those two panel as component. For a frame window, it knows that it is accommodating two component. So it sees those two panel as a component or a control, and it sees one control is at the north position and one control is placed in the center of the border layout. Then if you look at the panel perspective, this top panel tells you that I'm a container for the text field, output text field with a red text, and it says you that I am also a component because I will get added to the frame window. The same goes for the panel in the bottom. That's all here in this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.